At the end of the parsha, the Torah relates how Moshe Rabbeinu commands and tells the Leviim, those that were carrying the Aron Bris Hashem, to take the Sefer Torah, etc. And then the pasuk says that Moshe Rabbeinu tells them, Hakhilu Elai, gather for me all the elders of the Shvatim, the officers, and I will speak in their ears, etc. Rashi quotes the words Hakhilu Elai, gather to me, and Rashi explains that on that day they did not blow the trumpets to bring the whole community together, as was usually done, because the pasuk, when it speaks about making the trumpets, the pasuk says, Asay lecha, make it for yourself, for Moshe, v'lo hishlit Yehoshua aleim. So he didn't give to Yehoshua control over these trumpets. Furthermore, Rashi says, v'af b'chayev, and even during Moshe Rabbeinu's lifetime, they were hidden away before he passed away, to fulfill what it says in the pasuk, ve'ein shiltoin b'yoim hamavis, that a person doesn't have control or rulership on the day that he passes away. So this was, in a certain sense, something missing, what seems like. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't have these trumpets. Now, simply the way we understand Rashi is that the question in the pasuk that Rashi is coming to preempt or to answer is, as Rashi himself says, that they didn't blow trumpets to gather the people that day. And the question is why? Why did they not gather the people that day through the trumpets? As the pasuk says in Parshas Ba'aloischa, Asei l'chashtei chatzoitzrois, you should make these trumpets to call the people together. How do we know that Hakhilu does not mean to gather them according to the regular way of gathering, which would be with trumpets? Maybe that is exactly what the pasuk means. It says Hakhilu, and there gather the people. So maybe automatically it includes whatever that takes, including the trumpets. So the proof for the fact that it was not used with the trumpets is from the fact that who is Moshe Rabbeinu commanding to gather the Yidden? He's speaking to the Leviim. But the blowing of the trumpets to gather the Yidden would specifically be through the Koyanim. As the pasuk says, it had to be Bnei Aaron HaKoyanim. So that tells us that there were no trumpets. So we can understand how we know that there were no trumpets. But says the Rebbe, what's not understood over here is why Rashi says, Lefi shenemar asei lecha v'lo hishlit Yehoshua aleim. Why does Rashi have to mention over here the fact that it was only given to Moshe Rabbeinu to use and not for Yehoshua? How does Yehoshua come into the story over here? Who mentioned anything about Yehoshua? Seemingly, again, Rashi is only coming to answer why Moshe Rabbeinu is not using the trumpets through the Koyanim for gathering the Yidden. So Rashi should have just said, Bekitzur, he should have just said simply and briefly, they did not blow the trumpets to gather the Yidden because ve'ein shilton b'yom hamavis. So Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't have the trumpets to use. He doesn't have power, so to speak. He doesn't have that control on the day he passes away. Why is it relevant to mention the point of Yehoshua? Furthermore, says the Rebbe, when we look into the source of Rashi, in the Medrash Tanchuma, in the Medrash Rabbah, on the pasuk Asei Lecha, which is a pasuk about making the trumpets. So that's clearly where Rashi's source is. But when you look over there, this idea that Yehoshua didn't get control over the trumpets is not mentioned at all in connection to this special gathering that happened on the day that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away. It's more said as a general statement that on Asei Lecha, the pasuk says Asei Lecha, so Yehoshua didn't use it. Only you use it, and Yehoshua didn't use it. And the Medrash goes on to say, the proof is, we find that in other words, that's only made for Moshe Rabbeinu. We find that Yehoshua doesn't use it. When he comes to fight with Yericho, he doesn't use the trumpet. So that's what the Medrash is saying on the word Asei Lecha, that it's only for Moshe, not to Yehoshua. Only afterwards, as a separate thing, as a separate chidush, the Medrash adds another point and says, and don't think it was only Yehoshua that didn't use it, but rather even Moshe Rabbeinu himself didn't use it all the way to the end. Even while he was alive, it was put away. As the pasuk says, Hakilu Elai, our pasuk, Moshe Rabbeinu says, gather for me. But what happened to the trumpets? Why not with the trumpets? So rather, says the Medrash, because they were put away, they were hidden, as the pasuk says, Ein shilton b'yom hamavos. So the question is, how is it that Rashi, specifically, who's the one that's coming to just explain the simple meaning of the pasuk, should suddenly bring this whole extra idea of that the trumpets were only for Moshe Rabbeinu and Yeshua didn't get the right over them? Why is this in any way relevant to this gathering that Moshe Rabbeinu is gathering the Yidden now? Hakilu Elai. The Rebbe says there are Mefarshim that explain that if Yeshua would have gotten the rights over these trumpets after Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, then they would have been used now, this day the Moshe Rabbeinu is passing away as well. And that's why Rashi is saying that no, Yeshua never got them later, and that's why they're not, and that's why there wouldn't be a reason to use them now either. But says the Rebbe, that still does not answer the wording in Rashi. Because if we look in the order of Rashi, Rashi should have first explained why Moshe Rabbeinu is not using the Chatzos. And that would be because of what Rashi says at the end of the Rashi, Ein Shilton B'Yom HaMavis, that he doesn't have this rulership on the day he passes away. And then to add another point, that the fact that they weren't used at all, even as far as Yeshua is concerned, is because Yeshua never got a hold of these trumpets. So that would be another point. But not to start off with the idea that first of all, it's not being used because that it's only made for Moshe Rabbeinu and not for Yeshua, and then later add this other detail why Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't use it, because Ein Shilton B'Yom HaMavis. The Rebbe says there are also some other diyukim, certain wording in Rashi that we need to understand, and to mention a few. Number one, what's this expression, V'lo hishlit Yeshua aleim? He didn't give Yeshua the control or the rulership over them. How does this make sense in regards to trumpets, to giving rulership with the trumpets? Rashi should have said, seemingly similar to the wording of the Medrash, V'lo nishtamish b'am Yeshua. Yeshua didn't use them, or a similar expression. Especially, says the Rebbe, that according to a number of versions, Rashi, on the words Asei L'cha, which is back again in the parsha where it speaks about making the trumpets in Parshas Ba'al Oischa, Rashi's words over there, according to some versions, is Ata Oisa u'mishtamish b'hem. You, Moshe Rabbeinu, are going to use them, make them and use them, and no one else and nobody else. So that seems to be a more fitting expression. Number two, in the Dibur HaMaschal, Rashi quotes the words Hakilu Elai. The question is, how does this word Elai, why is this relevant to this Rashi? Seemingly, Rashi is only coming to explain the idea of Hakilu, of this gathering, that the way this gathering happened was not through the trumpets. So why does Rashi have to quote the word Hakilu Elai, gather to me? Says the Rebbe, we're going to understand this by first prefacing another point, and that is that it's generally known that Rashi, in his Pirush ala Torah, and so too on Shas, it's not his style to ask a question and then give what the answer is. He doesn't specify the question that he's coming to answer, he's coming to preempt. Rather, Rashi just says the pshat in the pasuk, and b'derech memela, and automatically any questions that can arise in this pasuk or all disappear. Furthermore, says the Rebbe, even in the places where Rashi does clearly start with a question, it's not because that is the main question that Rashi is coming to answer, but rather, again, there is a general question that Rashi is coming to answer, but by specifying this particular question and the answer, automatically will also answer the more general question which Rashi didn't specify. Says the Rebbe, the same thing is true in our case. When Rashi starts this pirush, that they didn't blow with trumpets that day, which we thought originally, that is the question Rashi is coming to answer, says the Rebbe, no, that's actually not the main question in the pasuk. On the contrary, says the Rebbe, there are quite a number of pashtonim, which means the commentators that explain the simple pshat of the pasuk, that when it says Vayetzav Moshe HaLeviim, Moshe commanded the Leviim to take the Sefer Torah and to gather the Yidden, etc., it actually is referring to the Koyanim, not to those that are called Leviim. We had already an earlier pasuk where it says that Moshe Rabbeinu gives the Sefer Torah to the Koyanim B'nai Levi. So the Koyanim can be called Leviim over here. So it could be that the Koyanim are the ones that are gathering the Yidden. And if that's the case, then we could say, at least al derech hapshat, we could say that actually when it said Hakilu, if it is happening through the Koyanim, so it's very possible that was happening with the trumpets as well. Because as we said before, just from the word Hakilu doesn't tell you that they didn't use the trumpets. The reason we said before they didn't use the trumpets is because it was the Leviim. But al pimshut mikra could be it was even the Koyanim. So it's not what's bothering Rashi. So what was bothering Rashi? Rashi is mainly bothered by a more general question. And it actually applies to the words, both words, hakilu and elai, as we'll soon see. And it's in order to answer this question, Rashi explains that the hakilu over here, this gathering over here, was actually not done with the trumpets to gather the people. And once we explain why they didn't use the trumpets, automatically this is going to answer this more general question. What's the question that Rashi is bothered by? Says the Rebbe, right in the beginning of our parsha, Rashi said on the words, Moshe Rabbeinu says, I can no longer go out and come in, etc. Rashi says, Uchal means, I'm not able to, means I'm not allowed. Because permission was taken away from me and it was already given over to Yehoshua. A few psukim further, Rashi says a general rule. Dabar echad lador v'lo shnei dabarim lador. There's one ruler, there's one leader per generation and not two. In other words, at this point in Parshas Vayelech, Yehoshua in a certain sense had already become that one leader for the generation. So here comes the question. How is it then that this gathering of the Yidden is happening through Moshe Rabbeinu? Yes, it's true, Moshe Rabbeinu wants to speak to the Yidden, he wants to give them a message. He wants to tell them, he's going to make the heavens and the earth the witnesses, etc., which is going to be part, and the continuation, the end of the parsha and so on. But the actual gathering of all the people, seemingly that's only shayach to the Nasi, to the Manig Adar, to the leader. He is the one that gathers all the Yidden. If Yehoshua is already the leader of the people and the one leader, so he is the one that should have gathered the Yidden, and then Moshe Rabbeinu could speak to them. Or, says the Rebbe, at the very least, it should have been both together gathering them. Like we have actually by them speaking at the gathering to the Yidden, we do have them speaking together. It says who? Moshe Rabbeinu is speaking, V'Hishaya bin Nun along with Yehoshua. But what is this meaning of Hakilu Elai? It says gather to me. It's as if it's Moshe Rabbeinu specifically saying gather them to me. He is the one that's getting the Yidden together, seemingly negating Yehoshua. It's in order to answer this question, says the Rebbe, that Rashi prefaces the words by saying that day they did not blow in the trumpets to gather the people, and immediately explains regarding Yehoshua that he had no connection to the trumpets. Because the pasuk says, Asay lecha, make for yourself for Moshe Rabbeinu, and Rashi explains, V'loi hishlit Yehoshua aleim, and Yehoshua never got the power over these trumpets. And once we know that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't give Yehoshua this power over the trumpets, that's automatically also going to tell us why this specific gathering was specifically through Moshe. How do we understand this? Says the Rebbe, we're first going to look at another question. In regards to this idea that it's made specifically for Moshe Rabbeinu and not for Yehoshua, the question is, Asay lecha, Hashem says to them, you should make for yourself, you should use them, and nobody else should use these trumpets. Seemingly that would negate just ordinary people using the trumpets. But someone like Yehoshua, who is the one that Moshe Rabbeinu asked Hashem to appoint someone over the community that's going to lead the Yidden. He is the manig of the Yidden. He is the roya, the shepherd of Adas Hashem. He is the mamalim mokim of Moshe Rabbeinu. Why shouldn't these trumpets be given over to Yehoshua to use them also to gather the people, just like Moshe Rabbeinu used them? And generally, seemingly all the rulership, the power of Moshe Rabbeinu went over to Yehoshua. So why didn't this aspect go over to Yehoshua as well? Says the Rebbe, this itself tells us that not all matters of Moshe Rabbeinu went over to Yehoshua. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu's rulership over the Yidden was on a much higher level than Yehoshua's. Similar to something else that Rashi had told us earlier already, that Pnei Moshe Kechama, Moshe's face is similar to the sun, Yehoshua's to that of the moon. And that's what Rashi means, Lehishlit Yehoshua aleim. And we asked the question before about why this expression of rulership over the trumpets. Yeshua didn't use them. Yeshua doesn't have rulership, power over them. In other words, because the power of Moshe Rabbeinu's rulership, not all of it was given to Yeshua. Like, for example, in this area, the idea of the trumpets wasn't given to him. Now that we understand that not everything is given to Yeshua, says the Rebbe, now we can understand that as long as Moshe Rabbeinu is alive, even after technically permission was taken from Moshe and given to Yeshua to lead, but it still would not be the right thing that Yeshua should be the one gathering all the Yidden, and especially in front of Moshe Rabbeinu, because there are still things that were never given to Yeshua, and that the only one that's in control or the boss is Moshe Rabbeinu. And that's what the first part of Rashi is saying. That again, Rashi is coming to tell us why Moshe Rabbeinu is gathering the Yidden, because we see from the trumpets that not everything was given to Yeshua. So Moshe Rabbeinu, in a certain sense, in regards to certain things, is still the leader. And that's why he's the one gathering the Yidden. Hakilu Elai. It's only after Rashi dealt with this more general idea of why Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, Hakilu Elai, gather to me, he's the one gathering the Yidden. Now Rashi comes and explains the next detail of how the Hakilu happened. In other words, the fact that the trumpets, Moshe Rabbeinu also didn't use the trumpets. And this, he says, another point, that even during his lifetime, they were hidden away because of the concept of Ein Shilton B'Yom HaMavos, that even Moshe Rabbeinu, on the day he passes away, doesn't have all of that, the full control. The Rebbe now moves on to the Yeina Shel Torah, to the Chassidus aspect of this Pirush Rashi. And the Rebbe asks, yes, it's true that the gathering itself couldn't have been done through the trumpets. As we just explained, the trumpets would have showed a certain power, a certain rulership, and to a certain extent, Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't have that on the last day. But the question is, why is it that we now need another change also, that instead of the Kohanim gathering the Yidden, it's the Leviim? And in order to understand this, the Rebbe looks a little bit deeper on this concept of Ein Shilton B'Yom HaMavos, of Moshe Rabbeinu not having this rulership on the day he passes away. And the question is, how does this make sense? Al Pi Pnimi Yisrael Yanim, at least. How does it make sense that on the day of Moshe's passing, Moshe Rabbeinu, in a certain sense, is having this yerida? It seems to be a descent, that he doesn't have this power, this control. When we know that by tzaddikim, it's on the contrary. They're always going stronger and stronger from strength to strength. They're always being elevated from one day to the next, especially on the very last day of his life in this physical world. Surely Moshe Rabbeinu is on our very, very highest level. Especially that we know that on the day Moshe Rabbeinu passes away, he actually achieves this highest level called the 50th gate of wisdom, that was up until then not given to Moshe Rabbeinu. And finally, on this last day of his life, he has the highest level, the Sha'ar Anun. So how does it make sense to say Ein Shilton, he doesn't have control on the day he passes away? So the Rebbe says we can explain this, that Ein Shilton B'Yom HaMavos by tzaddikim is actually the other way around. It's because of the greatness that's happening on that day, because of the high level that they're on that day. That's the pshat Ein Shilton. In other words, they're higher than the idea of rulership. Rulership represents that there's some sort of connection to the one who you're ruling over. So for example, a king, we say, Mishich Me'vamaylo Gavoya Mikol Ha'am. It's an expression that says about Shaul HaMelech, but Chassidus applies it generally to the idea of a king. That from shoulder above, he's above all the people, that even his shoulder is higher than everyone else. How much more so his head is above everyone else? But nevertheless, it's the type of being raised, the type of being elevated, that still is in some way proportionate to the people, still in some way connected to the people. He's higher than them, but it's still a measurable distance. And that's what rulership is all about. He is their ruler. Whereas on the day of passing, the tzaddik is elevated to such a high level that he's completely higher than the people, and therefore this idea of shilton, of rulership over the people, doesn't apply. So you might think, if Moshe Rabbeinu is elevated to such a high level, completely higher than having this control or rulership over the Yidden, so one could think that chas v'shalom, there's no longer any connection between Moshe and the Yidden. Comes along our pasuk and says that no, even as Moshe Rabbeinu is on this very, very highest level on the day of his passing, Moshe says, Hakilu Elai, bring the people closer to me, to Moshe Rabbeinu, because Yidden in their very essence are one with the essence of Moshe Rabbeinu. As Rashi famously says, Moshe hu Yisrael, Moshe is the Yidden, and the Yidden are Moshe. And says Rebbe, this is the inner reason why this gathering happened without the trumpets. Gathering with the trumpets would show that there's some sort of yigiyah, some sort of effort, some sort of work being involved to gather them. But the way the Yidden are being gathered to Moshe Rabbeinu on the day of his passing, when his very essence is being revealed, what's happening over here is now the essential bond between Yidden and Moshe Rabbeinu. That's what's causing them to get closer to Moshe Rabbeinu, and that's what's having this impact. And as Chazal actually say, that inside of every single Yid, there's the idea of Yira Milsa Zutra Sehi. So just briefly, the Gemara brings the pasuk that says Moshe Rabbeinu speaks to the Yidden and says that what is Hashem asking of you, but only to fear Him. The Gemara asks, is fear such a little thing? And the Gemara says, yes, for Moshe Rabbeinu it's a small thing. The Alter Rebbe explains this in Tanya as meaning, how does that help us all if it's for Moshe Rabbeinu a small thing? Because every single Yid has that level of Moshe Rabbeinu alav hashalom inside of him. So even though a person doesn't feel necessarily the Moshe inside of him, but since in essence Moshe is Yisrael and Yisrael are Moshe, so this level of Moshe has an impact on the Yid in an automatic way that it makes that Yira, the fear of Hashem, should be an achievable goal for every single person. So back to our point. So every single Yid has that essential bond to Moshe Rabbeinu. Every Yid is elevated to that level of Moshe Rabbeinu on the day Moshe Rabbeinu passes away. So again, the rest of the time Moshe Rabbeinu, so to speak, lowering himself or ruling over the Yidden represents how he's connected to the Yidden. On the day he passes away, he's on a much higher level, but now the Yidden are being elevated up to his level because they're always connected to him. Says that, but now we can understand why this gathering specifically through the Levium. Chassidus explains the difference between Kohanim and Levium is that Kohanim generally are the idea of chesed, kindness, which is more about drawing down from above to below. On the other end, Levium are usually associated with Gevura, which is more the opposite. It's about Halah, reaching up, going up, ascending from below to above. Says the Rebbe, therefore, in order to gather the Yidden to Moshe Rabbeinu, to bring the Yidden to his elevated state as he's on the day he passes away, higher than this level of shulton or rulership, who are the ones that do it? Is the idea of the Levium. They are the ones that can achieve by the Yidden to go up, to be elevated to this darga of Moshe Rabbeinu.